So, how does someone end up on the occult path of the supposed wickedest man in the world? Or, in other words, Thelema. Join me today for a special storytime video where I share with you all how I got into Thelema. I'm Mavius Lynn. I'm an artist and practicing occultist with a primary focus on Western ceremonial magic and Thelema. And today I'm very excited to talk to you all about a question I get probably more than any other question, which is, how did I get into Thelema? So the best way to answer this question is, of course, with a story, a grand story of how I got here. So I hope you find it as entertaining as it is to tell you all about. So my story begins, as all stories begin, good ones, a lot of good ones perhaps, which is my love of books and reading. So way back when I was in middle school as well as in high school, I was, and I still am today, I was a very avid reader. I was just read anything and everything in front of me. But with all good things, as a kid, you eventually read all the things you're interested in reading in the library. And in my case, I was very interested in science, religion, politics, all these rather inflammatory issues. And in particular, I wanted to read about evolution and other LGBT issues. Unfortunately, in the libraries that I had access to in school, as well as surrounding libraries, they just didn't have those books in stock. I guess because they were too controversial, they were either removed or just never put in the collection to begin with. So, me, where do I go? Well, I didn't want to read kids' books again, so I ended up picking up the next most interesting thing, which in my case, it was philosophy. Now, you can imagine a middle school kid or a high school kid picking up some of the denser titles of philosophy like Camus or Sartre or Nietzsche or Heidegger, but I did. I picked them up and I read about things like existentialism, nihilism, and I was like, whoa, I don't understand what's going on, but I was also very bored and very nerdy. Not much has changed. So I just kept reading, and I would read and reread and read some more. And I would look stuff up online. And this was at a time, too, where there wasn't such a great plethora of resources online. But, I did my best with it. And I eventually just fell in love with philosophy. And as a result of my love, of course, I wanted to read more about it. And I turned to the internet, actually, to try to get more resources and connect with people who had similar interests. So I started a blog where I just sort of shared my thoughts. Like, I would read something by Nietzsche, for example, and then, I added a bunch of quotes and my thoughts. I also talked a little bit about religion, the occult, a little bit about politics, not much there. But over time, keeping this online blog and connecting with people allowed me to meet people with similar interests who gave me resources and suggested more books for me to read. And I just sort of naturally, organically made friends. There was really, no big scheme or intention behind that. I was just, like I said, organically meeting people online. And interestingly enough, the people I ended up meeting and connecting with all happened to be, or mostly I should say, not everyone, but a lot of people were people in the Church of Satan, which is very shocking, but I never really sought out the Church of Satan. And I certainly didn't originally read Anton LaVey's works, which is kind of backwards. I feel like a lot of people approached atheistic Satanism saying, oh, that looks so cool, I want to get into it, and they read LaVey. But I think I sort of got into it the backwards way because I read all the philosophy and had my own opinions established before I approached LaVey. So obviously my friends were in the Church of Satan, like, oh yeah, read LaVey, so I did. And from reading his work, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I guess I'm an atheistic Satanist. By his definition, as he laid out in the books, it wasn't really a title I necessarily sought after or aspired to be. I just sort of happened to be an atheistic Satanist from my previous reading. And then I was able to approach LaVey's work and say, oh, I kind of agree with most of this. It just happenstance, I guess. And I was fine with the title, although the title is a bit, raises some eyebrows, not something I'm super open about back then. But, it resonated with me, his work, and so I rolled with it, and I certainly greatly valued the friendships I made in the Church of Satan. Really great people, still friends with a lot of them today. And there's one gentleman in particular who, interestingly enough, not to name any names here, but he was previously in the OTO before he ended up in the Church of Satan, and a higher up in the Church of Satan as well, and he was actually the one who introduced me to Aleister Crowley and the works of Aleister Crowley, which I read at the time and said, whoa, this is some good stuff. But unfortunately at the time, by the time I ended up reading Crowley, I was off to college, and at college I was, really focused on my studies, and I just sort of set Crowley aside. It wasn't until after college when I had a chance to pick back up Crowley and treat his works with the study and attention it really deserved. But I would say this whole time I was a practicing occultist. I just, you pick things up as you get, interest and time to do so. Life unfortunately gets in the way of a lot of things. But I picked back up Crowley, and so at the time I picked up Crowley, I'd be like, yeah, I'm an occultist, I'm an atheistic Satanist, but I really wouldn't have considered myself a Thelemite. I was just a person who liked Crowley a lot, and so I kept studying Crowley and his work, and it kept making a lot of sense. It kept, how things just click into place? That's really what reading Crowley felt like to me. He approaches things, I would say Thelema is a fuller system of mysticism. There's a lot more depth there than what LaVey talked about. Now, I love Anton LaVey. I really do. Crowley just goes a lot deeper. And, between the two, I said, wow, this is something I want to keep reading. And so eventually, you read and you read and you read, and you get to a point you're like, okay, I gotta try some of this out because I think it would change my life. It's of interest to me, I'm interested in it, so I did. So I started down a path of incorporating Thelema into my daily practices, into my life, and I got incredible results, life-changing results in my outlook, everything, how I approach things, and it worked in a way I never anticipated. It transformed me in a way I wasn't really prepared for. Hopeful, but I thought that level of personal transformation was just not possible through occult practices. Thelema changed my mind. Out of everything I've tried over the years, Thelema changed my mind, and, at some point, you're doing these practices daily, you're doing the research, doing the work, you're trying to discover and do your true will, you accept the Book of the Law, all these things, and at some point, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, which is what happened to me, and think, I'm a Thelemite, which is what happened. That being said, along the path of the great work of trying to find that divine equilibrium and trying to find that balance in myself, I think there is absolutely still a place for the work of Anton LaVey, for other atheistic Satanists. I think it really balances me as a person and my personality and parts of myself that I need to work on. Just like other philosophies and other, practices from other paradigms and other paths. I see a lot of people mixing paganism into their occultism or, borrowing from this or that, and I think that's perfectly valid. It really just depends on you as a person and what you need. So not to go down a whole nother path, let's bring this train right on back to how I ended up in Thelema, which is at this point by accident, really. But that being said, you know, I ended up in a way that I was like, okay, yeah, I am absolutely a Thelemite. In addition to still incorporating some of these other philosophical beliefs and frameworks. In my case, it was atheistic Satanism, and still is. So I don't see the need to shed what I find good and endearing and helpful with the work of Anton LaVey, for example, in my personal life and in my personal practice. But ultimately, when you unpack everything I have going on as a person and a practicing occultist, it's Thelema. At the end of the day, it's Thelema. And what a joy it is to be here. So that about sums it up. I mean, that's my journey. I started off as a nerdy kid who read way too much philosophy, met these cool people, the Church of Satan, kind of fumbled my way eventually to studying Aleister Crowley in more in depth, given it a try, and it worked. And here I am, here talking to you on various social media platforms and on YouTube. So look for me there if you haven't. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and of course YouTube, where you can like and subscribe. But more importantly, other than telling you to like and subscribe, more importantly, I want to thank you so much for watching my video. Ultimately, I hope this inspires you along your journey, along your path, to give Thelema a try, or give whichever occult paradigm speaks to you. So, thank you so much for watching, and also, I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you.